Hey, what's up, everyone? Roger back here with the Real Breakdown. Here with my buddy Edgar. You guys know him. Guys, we're going to be talking today about Black Panther Wakanda Forever.
Yes,
Dude,
sir.
I've been so excited for this movie. I know you really, really love the first Black Panther, man. Like,
I
how
adore the
excited were
first-
you for this?
I adore the first one. So, it's funny because if you had asked me this, a year after the first one came out, I probably would have been like, I don't know. I don't think it's going to top it. But then, so much has changed since then. We lost Chadwick. We, got this really cool interpretation of one of Marvel's most famous characters. And, I kind of been all over the place. I was, week of release, super pumped. Super pumped. So I would say going into the movie, I was super excited.
Yeah, man, dude, I was so excited. The trailer that they put out for this, like, I don't know if it was the first or second trailer. I don't know how many they put out, but that trailer when they with the "No Woman No Cry" song and like mixed into the Kendrick Lamar song, like that trailer was so good. Seeing a Namor Tenoch Huerta, right? That's his name.
Super authentic name.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah. Representing the Hispanic Latino people, man. So yeah, dude, I love that trailer. And like coming into it, also there was a lot of speculation. What are they gonna do? Right? There was this whole debate on like, what should they do with the character? So we'll get into that a little bit. But yeah, I was really hyped for it, man. Coming off of two movies that I personally didn't really like that much in the Marvel universe, which for me is kind of huge to say.
Divisive.
Yes,
at the very
divisive.
least. Yeah.
Multiverse of Madness, Thor: Love and Thunder. I was not a big fan of the direction of those. But yeah, man, for this, I was like, this has to be the return to form. And I could say, man, it was definitely a return to form in my eyes. So let me ask you, man, coming out of the theater, what were like your initial thoughts?
Ooh, dude, I had a ton. It's a lot to process, man. It's a long movie, and it's not a light movie. There's a lot going on.
Yeah.
I think walking out was just like appreciating all that they were able to do, and even just thinking about the production of the movie, like Chadwick just passed away just over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
And you think about the fact that they were able to take the story they already had, essentially redo the whole thing, because it's not like you could just we'll just remove his character and put somebody else in his place.
Right.
They had to start it from scratch, and in the middle of a pandemic, like I just walked out that theater like impressed, like wow, like on paper this movie had everything working against it.
Yep.
And Ryan Coogler is a fantastic director. Creed's fantastic. I haven't seen Fruitvale Station, but I've heard that's really good. Yeah. I think he did a fantastic job. So that was my initial reaction. It's just like this guy delivered. Like he rose to the challenge and delivered.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of which, man, like, so let's talk a little bit about the directing, right? And like the story. So like that, I just want to jump right into it, man, because we got to talk about what happened in this movie. Sure. So first of all, you mentioned Ryan Coogler, great director. I haven't seen Fruitvale Station either, but I've heard great things. I watched Creed. I don't think Creed is a masterpiece, but it's a very well done film, and obviously I really enjoyed Black Panther, the first one, and so I know Ryan Coogler is a good director, and for him to take this movie on, man, like what I pull out of this movie, like not just story wise, but what he did as a director is he pulled a Russo brothers, where they did so much in a movie, so many storylines, and I felt like he did it well. He interweaved it well. Like when I think about a movie and I think about what it needs to do for me, like the story was there, the character development was there, the emotion was there, the score was great,
the score,
the cinematography, like everything that was done. Also, you mentioned it. This is a long movie, and not once did I feel that like it dragged. And for it to be, I think I heard it's like, aside from the Avengers movies, I think it's like one of the longest or second longest like movies.
Yeah, something like that and like No Way Home are like right around.
Yeah. So the fact that like this movie was lengthy, and it's not that I didn't feel the length. I did feel that I felt that it felt like a almost 3 hour movie.
Yeah.
But not once did I feel like it dragged, and I really enjoyed like every moment, and the pacing of it I thought was really well. So I have to commend Ryan Coogler for the job that he did in like directing and putting this film together. I don't know who wrote it, but the writing I think was really well done as well.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that, man?
I think, one of the good tests for a really long movie is like, where's the bathroom breaks? Like, where do I leave?
Yeah.
And this is one of those movies where, I've seen it twice. You've seen it twice, right?
Yep.
Having seen it twice, like, I'm hard pressed to tell you, like, oh, this is a good moment to walk out. Like, the whole thing, is just done really well. And like you said, like, yes, it's a long movie, but you don't ever feel like, this thing ended 5 times. Like, I love Lord of the Rings, but sometimes I'm watching those movies and I'm like, this is like the 3rd ending already. Like, can it just end? It's really well done. The pacing feels great. That's been an issue too with Marvel, I feel like, in Phase 4 is their pacing has been kind of all over the place. And, and I'm saying that as somebody that still really enjoys everything they're producing. Because I know it's kind of become like the hip thing online to be like, oh no man, like Endgame was Marvel's like downfall after that.
They've changed.
Yeah. I still really enjoy everything they're putting out, but hey, at the same time, I am gonna vocalize when there's aspects of their films that I think need improvement. But this is one of those movies where it passed the test. Like, I don't have many notes to give it. Like, it's like you said, direction is fantastic, the acting is fantastic. The lore, getting introduced to this whole other nation and their history, and it's one that like literally was made for the MCU. Like,
Yep.
They completely redid Namor's history, and and I love what they did. So the fact that they were able to, like, it's not like they just directly translated a story from the comics. Like, they did reinvent him, and I just feel like the fact that they were able to pull all this stuff off is just like, props to them.
Yeah, no, for sure, man. And so yeah, I mean, let's dive into it, man. So I'm talking, I'm saying that there was a lot of storylines, a lot of things happened in this movie. Let's talk about a few of them, man. Yeah. The first thing, you mentioned it already, the introduction to Namor and the introduction to Talocan. And I mean, do we call them the Talocanians, or I want to say Atlanteans, but it's not. Like,
that's kind of like before the movie came out, that was my gut reaction. Is like every time I would explain to somebody like who Namor was, I would say like Atlantean, and they'd be like, no, but he's not. So I've just been saying the Talocan. I think in the movie they say Talocan, like in like the
okay.
In like the subtitles, but
so tell me what you thought about that introduction, man. I want to hear your thoughts on like how they introduced him, what you thought about that.
I love that whole scene, that whole sequence with like the ship, like you have these like 2 divers down there, and then like you just see like the wire. Like I love that whole, like, the introduction to Talocan was just, I think, really well done. And then the fact that you don't see Namor right away, like you just see that this helicopter gets taken down, and then there's like this silhouette, in the air. I thought that was really well done. I think they did a good job of making him threatening, but also charming. Because like the next time we see him, he's meeting, Ramonda and Shuri, and like, he still says some threatening stuff, but he's got a charm about him. Like, when he's talking about like what happened in the ocean, he tells them like that there's these, scientists that were drilling or whatever, but he's like, I stopped them. But you can see like he's just kind of like gloating about it.
Yeah.
He's really well done. I think Tenoch Huerta did a really good job, and that introduction, fantastic way to introduce somebody who's probably going to be a huge character going forward.
Moving forward, yeah.
So I thought it was really well done.
Yeah, that was one of the things that I wasn't worried about it, but I thought they did so well. I agree with everything that you said about, I didn't need this big reveal of him like stepping into some place and being like, I'm Namor. like how do you introduce him, right?
Yeah.
The way they did it was great. Yes, that kind of like that silhouette, like that, like he's there, but you don't know what it is. So I really like that. And to kind of speak on what you were saying about Namor and like his character, I loved what they did with him because based on what I know from, playing the Marvel games or reading some of the Marvel comics, and like Namor is this guy who like sometimes he's a villain, sometimes he's a good guy. Like he plays both sides, but really his whole reason behind it is that like his people in the water, like in the ocean, come first.
Yeah.
Anything that threatens that, he's gonna go after, and he will become the villain against the, you know, what do they call him? The
the surface.
The surface, yeah. So he will literally, you know, like attack all the surface people, like if they threaten like his people in the ocean. So like I think they did a really good job of balancing that, like, hey, like he can be a good guy, but he can also be a villain. Like, and he's formidable on both ends as kind of a villain coming to Wakanda and literally trashing the capital city, like, you know, and getting all the way to that window where Ramonda was standing. Like, not many people can do that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, especially Wakanda and the way that the country was portrayed, right? So, I thought that was really cool. So I really like how they played his dynamic. I felt like based off of what I know of Namor, that felt like Namor. It didn't feel like, you know, that they were trying to go like, they're trying to be, you know, Aquaman, or they're trying to be like, you know, this fish guy or something like that. Like, no, he felt like Namor and like what Namor stands for. So I really enjoyed that, man. I really dug that, and I thought the whole introduction to Talocan was really cool. The fact that they devoted as much time to Talocan and the Mesoamerican culture and all that stuff, I thought was phenomenal. Like, honestly, like I feel like other movies would have like just given you like a 5 to 10 minute like little piece on it. Nah, man, they spent like a third of the movie, like in different times, not in all one. So I love that they did that. Ryan Coogler, like that they gave it the time that it needed, and his story, like they really gave us his story. And I know you, like I said, it's different from the comics, but I liked what they did with it. And I was very happy and like just like thankful that like they did it the way that they did, because it worked. It really worked.
Yeah, I agree. Especially like, you know, just like one of the things you brought up, the comparison to Aquaman. Like Namor in the comics, he was the first of the two that was introduced. But like nowadays, nobody really cares about that. Like, you know, the general casual going audience just, you know, if you put out two of the similar movies at the same time, whichever one comes first, they're going to be like, oh, that was the original.
Yep.
So, you know, Aquaman, you know, came out, 2018? So I think it really would have been, problematic for Marvel if they just ripped Namor straight from the comics, because people would have just been like, oh, like, you know, this is Aquaman. So what they did, I think, was a really interesting way of modernizing him.
They gave him depth.
Yeah.
That's what I was trying to say. I couldn't find the word. The fact that they gave him depth and not just like he's the fish guy. You know, like, yeah. I
agree. Especially like, I think it did a good job of like, you know, people sometimes, one of the you know, the complaints they have against Marvel is just like, you know, oh, this is just, you know, what was the Scorsese quote? Like, this is just theme park cinema or whatever. Like it, and you know, they say like, oh, like no, there's not enough emotion. It's not real enough. Like with Namor, I think this really goes to show like Marvel at its best with like humanizing these like super ridiculous, overpowered characters, because you know they gave him this really cool backstory that. You know, you and I text a little bit about this before the movie. Like, you know, Mesoamerican culture, like, it's a huge part of the world, but in film, it really hasn't been represented a whole lot. Like, we've gotten tons of movies about, you know, Greek mythology, you know, ancient Rome, ancient Egypt, like, you know. But when you think of Mesoamerican culture, like the only movie that I can really think of off the top of my head is like Apocalypto.
Yep.
Other than that, like nothing else comes to mind. And you know, I'm sure I'm wrong. I'm sure there's others out there, but like there's nowhere near the exposure for that culture as there is for others. And you know, you think about it, and like that culture has influenced so much of like, especially us being like in the United States, like this portion of the world.
Yeah.
The Mesoamerican culture has influenced so much around us. And we don't even really think about it. And it's so cool that, like, it would have been easy to, like, you know, we got the depth of Wakanda in Black Panther. You know, we got to see the blending of different African cultures in that movie. It would have been super easy for them to just make Namor, you know, the Atlantean and not have depth, like you're saying. But by adding this history of, like, you know, everybody learns in school. The conquistadors arrived. You know, they killed off the Native Americans.
They brought the flu.
Right. Yeah. And adding that really grounded the story and just made like Talocan super cool to me. Like the fact that they're, speaking Nahuatl, and like it's this language is essentially like dying in like the real world because like so few people speak it, and the fact that now it's on such a grand stage, like the MCU is one of the biggest platforms you can have right now.
Yeah.
And the fact that it put the Mesoamerican culture on the big stage like that, like hats off to Marvel. A lot of people complain about like, oh, Marvel's going woke, Marvel's doing this. I think it's just, hey, there's so many different cultures in the world, like why not put them why not put them out there and represent them? So I was really happy with what they did. Like I couldn't be more happier with the decision to make Namor like this Mayan Aztec blend. Yeah,
I thought it was cool. And like going on to like other characters that they introduced, let's talk about Riri Williams, man. Like, so they introduced Riri Williams, who is Ironheart. We know she's gonna have a Disney Plus show. Yes, she's a Chicago native. We see the Chicago flag in her dorm and the Chicago Bulls pillow or whatever she had. So that was really cool. I have to say, man, as someone who like I was very much excited for Namor and to see what they did with the Black Panther title. Riri Williams was kind of an afterthought. Like I agree. I wasn't like against it, but I wasn't like excited for it. I was just like, okay,
I kind of agree. Like she's a character that I definitely know less about compared to others. So I agree. Kind of like it was like oh cool, she's gonna be in it, but it's not like one of those like I'm running to the theater to see Riri.
Yes. Yeah. And so I had zero expectations in seeing her. Like man, I was pleasantly surprised, man. Like I really thought. I think her name is like Dominique something.
Thorne, I think.
Yeah, something like that. So I think the actress did a great job, and I liked her introduction. I thought she was in it enough to where I'm like, okay, I got an introduction, but not like didn't overtake the movie. Like I said, Ryan Coogler and the writers of this film did such a good job of fitting these pieces in and giving them the proper amount of screen time that they needed. Now, could I nitpick on some things of like, well, how does she get this? How does she do this? Like, da-da-da. Like, but the movie was good enough in the other aspects of the main story that I didn't need that. And there were some explanations given right there in her garage. She's like, wait, is this all, like, Stark tech? Like, is this the Stark? And she's like, like, she wants to burn all the evidence. Like, you don't want to know where I got. So, we're going to find out more about her in her show. So, I wasn't too, like, I'm not going to nitpick about that. But, man, I really enjoyed her character. I thought her suit looked a little anime-ish at the end, but whatever.
It's a cool design though.
It's one of those things too where like you don't want it to look like Iron Man.
Yeah, I think that was a big thing. They were trying to differentiate it.
You don't want it to look like War Machine, right?
Yeah.
So and also this happens all the time, right? Ryan Coogler gets to introduce her, right? Mm-hmm. When she gets her own show, somebody else is gonna design her costume. So like it's gonna look different. This is like the introduction costume, right?
Yeah.
How many costumes did Captain America have? You know, like
that's true.
So I'm not too worried about that, but I did think it looked a little like. But
time to.
The movie was moving at such a good pace and like bringing up other important things in the movie that I didn't like care I don't care enough to nitpick about it. You know, I'm like, it's there, it is like cool. I like her character, so I'm excited for her Disney Plus show.
I agree. Yeah.
What did you think about Ironheart?
I liked it a lot too. I think I was very similar to you in what you're saying of like. I was, I'm glad that she was in the movie. Like going into it, like I was glad to know she was going to be in it, but she, she's not like a marquee character. Like, I need to see Riri. But I think they did a good job of introducing her, and just like you said, this is only her introduction. It's not like, they only have. There's so much going on in this movie. They only had so much time to dedicate to her, and in the time that they did, I feel like I walked away with a good idea of who she is, what how she kind of got to be who she is. Not necessarily like we don't have all her details, but like for example, I hate putting like Marvel against DC movies because I'm not trying to start the whole Marvel versus DC debate. But I'm not sure did you see Black Adam?
I did.
You did?
I did.
So the JSA, I thought they were cool in the movie, but what do we know about them? Nothing. They just show up, they fight, and it is what it is. This one, this movie, Riri's a supporting character, and realistically, she's kind of in the lower tier of supporting characters because, we have all the Talocan and such. and we still walk away with a decent bit of like understanding of her. So I thought that was really well done. It was cool to see her progression throughout the movie. You know, I thought she was funny, like when they're in like her, you know, her dorm and she's like, you know, panicking. I thought she was really well done, and I look forward to, you know, getting more of the character. And just like you said, it didn't feel like they just plastered in another Iron Man character. I think that was a lot of people's concerns too. Is like, we just got rid of Iron Man and now, you know, we have another.
Yeah, a derivative Iron Man character or something like that.
But I really liked her.
Yeah, she did have some funny one-liners, and that it was good. And so, I mean, I said that already, right? This movie, like, to me, like, it got back to Marvel form for me, but that's another topic. So, okay, so we got Namor, we got Talocan, we got Riri. Let's talk about the new Black Panther, man, or like what happened to the Let's talk about the movie story as a whole. Yeah. I have to start off by saying, man, to me, this movie as a whole, aside from the Talocan, aside from Riri Williams, like, this is Shuri's movie.
Yeah.
Like, this is Shuri's movie, and by saying that, I will also say that this movie, once again, just like WandaVision, is about somebody, the main character dealing with grief. This is about someone going through grief, man. Yes, you know, you put in the fact that Talocan and this and Wakanda and Vibranium and the Black Panther title, but this movie starts out with Shuri panicking.
Yeah.
Going through trying to find a cure for not find a cure, but like to cure the illness that T'Challa had, rebuilding the heart-shaped herb.
Yeah.
And wow, first of all, what a start to the film. But like, you start with her and you end with her.
Yeah.
So this is her film, and it's about how she handles the death of T'Challa, and spoiler alert, the death of Ramonda, her mother. Like, after watching the movie and taking a step back, I'm like, yo, this is Shuri's movie, and this is about her going through grief.
Yeah. From
beginning to end, and everything that happens in between. Which I was kind of shocked that, like, this is the route that they went. But I'm very glad that they did. Because we knew that, you know, there was this talk, right? And we brought it up earlier, so we'll talk about it now. That there was two camps. There was a recast T'Challa, because T'Challa's character means so much to, you know, the African-American community, to people of color, and, like, what he did, you know, for cinema, for young kids, young children, looking up to a character that has the same color of their skin, you know, like all that stuff, like, you know, recast them because T'Challa needs to live on, you know. And I was in that camp. Of like, the character T'Challa and what Black Panther did, like, means so much that I feel like we need to. And my personal opinion was to I know to a lot of people it wouldn't have made sense, but like, I would have recast Michael B. Jordan as T'Challa, because in real life they were really good friends. Yeah. And obviously Ryan Coogler works very well with him, and it would have just been beautiful. And it would have been one of those things of like, didn't that character play the villain? But it's one of those things where I think that Marvel would have just been like, yes, but you also know what happened. Yeah. Like, everyone in the world knew what happened. So whatever. So that was in that camp, and that was my thought on it. The other camp was, you have to kill him off because Chadwick was iconic. He was iconic in that role, and like, how could you replace him, right? Yeah. So there was those two camps, and whatever your opinion is on that, like, it's fine, right? Like, I think both sides have pros and cons. Yeah. So they killed the character off. So yep, T'Challa dies. They have the funeral. Very emotional, obviously. I will say this, and this is not a negative. I love the movie. It wasn't as emotional as I thought it was gonna be. Like I imagined myself like sobbing in the theater. I didn't get there, and it was emotional, you know. Like, I'm not gonna say that I had a tear rolling down my eye, but I felt the emotion. But it was not as emotional as I thought it would be. However, dude, how about that Chadwick tribute? Like, we got two Chadwick tributes. Two. You know, so I'll hand it over to you in a moment. But I just want to, like, you know, finish saying that, like, the fact that they killed him off, and like I said, was not the route that I thought they should have gone, but whatever. I'm not holding it against it. With Shuri coming in and her storyline, her through line, and what she went through, and I guess we'll dive deeper. I want to give you a chance to talk, but like we'll dive deeper into what she goes through. But I think that they did it very well. And even though it wasn't what I wanted or what I thought they should have done, they did it very well. And we should just bring up the end credit scene now, then, right?
Yeah. Well, we can. And
then we can go back to Shuri, because I do want to talk about what Shuri goes through in the movie.
Yeah.
But by saying, "Hey, this is Shuri's movie. She's going through grief. She becomes Black Panther," and by the end of it, we get that I think probably the most pivotal end credit scene that we've had, which is T'Challa has a son.
Yeah.
And I don't know why I didn't think about this, but that's the perfect resolution. So now they're doing both things.
Yeah.
Those two camps, the reason I brought up those two camps is that they're doing both of them, in my eyes.
I agree.
And I think that end credit scene, like, honestly, it put me at ease. Like, I already loved the movie, but, like, as a person who wanted that, like, no, the name T'Challa means something.
Yeah.
That character means something. And I love Chadwick, but, like, you know, to honor him, I would say continue his legacy, right? Now they can with his son. And that was a reveal, man. Like, I didn't audibly, a lot of people audibly gasped in the theaters that I was in. But I was definitely like, oh, and then I got so excited. So what are your thoughts on that, man? First, you know, I mentioned like what my overall thoughts of the story about it being Shuri's movie, and it being a story about grief, and the idea of Black Panther being of this movie doing both things, of both killing him off and moving forward, but then also like bringing him back. But the name of the character, and not really, you know. So what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, so that's a lot to unpack. So I'll start off with the, you know, recast or not debate. I was somebody who I didn't have an opinion. Well, I could be swayed either way. When they made the announcement, I wasn't disappointed that they weren't recasting. I know that, like, you know, of course, on like forums and Reddit, like just like you said, there was, you know, very like vocal, you know,
sides.
People on both sides. I was just kind of like, it's a super difficult situation. Whatever they choose to roll with, and you know, I'm fine with. You know, Marvel tends to make pretty good decisions with their movies, and I think as time has gone on, especially by the time the first trailer rolled around, I was of the belief of like, no, they made the right decision. Like, you know, it's one thing from a storytelling standpoint, you know, why should they keep the character of T'Challa going? But it's also something from a real world standpoint of like, the whole cast is grieving. Like, you know, they were all so close to him. And I think it would have been pretty impossible to just pluck another actor, put him in there, and then say, all right, pretend nothing happened. Yeah. So I think there's, you know, it was an unwinnable situation. You know, as for what you said about, like, you know, Shuri's storyline, it's interesting because, like, you know, I think most people figured she's going to be the Black Panther of this movie, especially once we saw like the Black Panther in the trailer. It was very obviously a female. Like, I didn't expect it to focus on her so much. I thought like the story was going to be like more of a Wakanda story, like it was going to be spread amongst the different characters
because it's called Wakanda Forever.
Yeah,
that's like, it's not a gripe, but I was like, it should have been called like
Shuri Forever.
You know, something. But
yeah. I thought I was kind of taken aback by that. Like, I was a little like, I'm surprised because like I do love Shuri in the first movie, but it is a big thing to ask of somebody to, hey, you're a supporting character, now you're the lead. That's a big step up. And props to Letitia Wright. You know, I know that there's been a lot of stuff online about.
I want to get to that, but yes.
But when it comes to her acting, when it comes to her doing her job, I got no complaints. Yep. I love, you know, what she did with the movie. You know, in the first movie, you know, she really only gets to play like the kind of goofy, fun side of Shuri.
Yeah.
And it really worked for the first movie, and I loved her in the first movie. But in this one, we get to explore that, like, well, what happens when that fun, goofy person is now put in a situation where they have lost everyone? She's the last of her clan.
And they reference that with M'Baku. The
yes,
conversation that she had with M'Baku.
Yes. Yeah.
Where she says, like, oh, now you want counsel from a girl who scoffs at tradition.
Yeah,
a child who scoffs at tradition. And he says, like, life has put you through so much that you can no longer be considered a child or something like that.
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right, man.
I love that line by M'Baku. I'm glad they had that callback. I'm glad that, like, I think that's something the MCU does really good at, is like kind of being very rhythmic and poetic with, like, a character will say something in one movie and then we come back to it in another, and it has a whole different meaning, or so I really do like that we go from M'Baku's introduction scene where literally he comes into the Warrior Falls, he like points at Shuri, like he's calling her out, like, oh, you trust a child, and then in this one he's just like you said, he's going to her to seek counsel. And so I think I love that because it just shows a lot. It shows that, like, two very opposing people can grow to really rely on each other and trust each other.
It shows character growth.
Yeah, it shows character growth, which is like what makes this long form storytelling between all these different movies.
Yes.
Like, it's what really makes it pay off, is the fact that, like, we're now, we've had those characters appear in, Infinity War and in Black Panther and Endgame and now here in Wakanda Forever. We've gotten to see that relationship flourish throughout those movies and those characters change throughout those movies. So I really love that aspect. And like I said, we'll get into, oh, Letitia said this, she did that. When it comes to playing her role, I think she did a really good job. I think it was a good decision to make the central, like, story hers, because it's, it takes you through grief. And kind of going into what you said about, like, you were surprised that the movie wasn't as, like, hard hitting emotionally as as you expected. I agree, and I also like that in the sense of, like, grief. There's various stages, and, like, one of the first things that we see is the movie says 1 year later. So, like, it's not like, boom, T'Challa's dead, we're, like, dealing with the immediate aftermath of that. Grief is this really interesting thing that humans go through, and there's different stages and there's different feelings. And I like that when we see T'Challa's funeral in the movie, it's not just a bunch of mourning. You see all this dancing, you see the bright colors, the white, it's very lively. And I think it goes to show you too also that, like, grief doesn't have to be, like, which I think is kind of the whole story of the movie, but grief doesn't have to be, like, the end of life. Like, it can be, like, what is love, or what is, oh God,
what is love?
Yeah, know what I was trying to say.
Yeah, what is grief if not love persevering? Yeah.
I think this movie does a really good job of carrying that, storyline through it too. So I'm really glad with what they did. And then, as like you mentioned at the very end, we kind of get this little, like, last minute, like, punch in the gut. T'Challa's son, I think it's really interesting they did that, especially naming him T'Challa, because just like you said, yes, we lost the original T'Challa, but the original T'Challa, the MCU version of him, in a lot of ways is pretty different from the comics. In the comics, T'Challa is king from when he's a young boy, basically. And so if they do choose to go that route, where this little kid ends up becoming king, you almost have a way of bringing in those other aspects of T'Challa that the MCU didn't have the opportunity.
Interesting. I didn't think about that.
Because he was already this grown man in the MCU when he took over.
Yeah. So I'm going to say this, and it's going to sound cynical, but, like, but I really, just for time's sake, I'm just going to say it this way. Like, I honestly felt like, I don't mind a woman being Black Panther. I just didn't think
walking on eggshells now.
No, I just didn't think that Shuri was the right fit. I think that Nakia should have been the Black Panther, or Okoye should have been the Black Panther, because they have like that warrior skill set, right? Yeah. And I just love Shuri as being the technological like mind that she is. Like when they bring in Reed Richards, I want Shuri to be like yo, Reed, like you get me, like you know what I'm saying, like so honestly, like yes, I wanted Chadwick to be recast. When that wasn't happening, I'm like fine. Then when I heard Shuri was gonna be Black Panther, I was like, okay, I don't hate it. I'd rather see Nakia or Okoye become Black Panther because they're both badasses, right? And I think Nakia in this movie was even more of a badass than she was in the first movie. Yeah. So I really liked her in this one. So when Shuri becomes Black Panther, I'm like, okay, cool, like whatever. Then they take her down that dark path, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And then when she gets stabbed, I'm like, whoa.
That's pretty rough for an MCU movie, by the
way. I was like, they're killing her off, because I had heard that as a rumor, like that, like they were gonna make her Black Panther, but halfway through the movie or early on in the movie, she was gonna die off. Basically, I'd heard that like
there'd be multiple
people donning the Black Panther suit.
Yeah.
So I'm like, when it didn't happen at the beginning or halfway through, but towards the end when she gets stabbed, I'm like, oh my god. They are gonna kill her off, and I was like, no, I'm mad because I want Shuri the character, but also like, ooh, maybe now Nakia or Okoye can become Black Panther, right?
Yeah.
But so I was kind of like, whoa, where are they going with this?
Yeah.
Which actually, as the movie like was ending, and we're seeing those mid-credit scenes, like the mid-credits roll.
Yeah.
I was in my head, I'm like, so like, I was like, wait, so she's still gonna be the Black Panther? Like what? Like I was questioning things, and then the end credit comes around, and I'm like, they fixed it. I was just like, they fixed it. And so it sounds cynical for me to say that like, oh, like at the end I still got what I wanted, like because I don't want Shuri to like be the Black Panther, but it's because she's so good at being that scientist, at being that inventor of creating that technology, of innovating, right?
Yeah.
And that kind of dives into another point of the movie, another through line of the movie, aside from the grief and like how she deals with the death of her brother and how she deals with the death of her mother, is by how does she deal with it?
Yeah.
She dives into her technology. She dives into her work, as to where her mother's like, hey, like, she brings her out to this place, leave your beads, like let's burn this stuff, let's do tradition. And so this idea of technology and tradition gets brought up a few times.
Yeah.
And it's even a callback from the last movie.
Yeah.
This kid who scoffs at tradition, right?
Yeah.
So, and I thought that through line was so interesting as a story point. And to then, when she takes the heart-shaped herb, and she goes into the what's it called?
The ancestral plane.
The ancestral plane.
Yeah.
Who does she see?
In Jadaka.
Jadaka, Michael B. Jordan.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Who people freaked out in the theaters that I was in, and I didn't freak out because I'm like, oh yeah, he's part of the world, right? But then I was like, okay, I guess it's a big deal that Michael B. Jordan's in here, right?
Yeah.
I didn't freak out, but I was like, oh wow, interesting. So that to me brought a whole other level. Like there were so many layers of depth in this movie that I thoroughly enjoyed in just the story alone of going through grief, of Talocan's perspective, of this like tradition versus like technology and modernization. So I just loved that so much. And so that through line of like how she dealt with the grief of Chadwick and like, or of T'Challa and like just putting herself in, she's in the lab all the time. Her mom's always has to go into the lab to see her. Then when her mom dies, she deals with it a different way. And then when she goes into the ancestral plane and sees her cousin, it's that conversation of, know why I'm here. Like, don't pretend that they didn't show up because they don't love you. You wanted me here because you know that you're not like your brother. You're not like your mother. You want revenge, and you're like me right now. So I thought that was super genius. I thought it was unexpected for me. Like I said, just how I didn't think it was going to be her story about grief, I also didn't expect this, like, really awesome and really rich, like, idea of, like, technology versus tradition in many different forms. Because even the Talocan aspect of it, like, kind of plays into it as well. Because they're very similar to Wakanda, right? Which is, like, an ancient society that's secluded and they're able to thrive on their own. So what are your thoughts on that, man?
I think just like you said, it's continuing those same themes that started in the first movie, and kind of expanding on that. I actually really liked going along with Shuri's journey of she's angry, she's vengeful. I love that one of the things that she says to Namor when she like is standing over him is she calls back to T'Challa's first appearance in the Civil War. She says, "Vengeance has consumed us."
Yes.
And that's
yes.
That was like the moment where I fell in love with the character of T'Challa, and because I love him in Civil War, and they're going through a very similar journey.
Yes.
If you think about it, because in Civil War, T'Challa is all about revenge for his father's death, and then once he's pretty much like at the end of the Civil War, he's like the level-headed person of like, the Avengers are fighting, like you're over here, caught
in the crosshairs.
Yeah, so he says to Baron Zemo like, vengeance is consuming them. I'm done letting it consume me. So I think that was the first moment where I was like, wow, I really love this character, and to see Shuri go through that similar journey and call back to what he said, I think was a really lovely thing.
And I just want to add to what I was saying too. I forgot to mention this. One of the key things that gets said in the movie that is this idea of like tradition versus like modernization or technology is what does Michael B. Jordan say to her? She's like, you didn't think the ancestral plane was real.
Oh, yeah.
To me, that was big. And it touches on, once again, that point. And, like, nowadays, right? Like, you were talking about the language that they use and how it's dying off. Like, you look at, like, us, right? Like, the traditions that my father had from Mexico, I don't necessarily follow all of those. And, like, the traditions that his father followed, like he doesn't necessarily follow. So it's like that idea of like, and that's something that newer generations like yourself and me and my younger sister, like it's tough to navigate sometimes.
Your younger sister probably more difficult than you, like
right. And so I loved that because I've dealt with that myself of like, can I call myself Mexican? Like, am I Mexican enough?
We're getting real deep.
You know what I'm saying? So, and it's because you might not believe certain things. And so that call out of, like, you didn't even think the ancestral plane was real. And, like, she admits to it. She's like, no, I didn't. And she's like, oh, shit, like, I'm here. And he's like, that's why you're in here. Like me, I was in the apartment. Yeah. And, T'Challa was, like, out in the fields with the Panthers, So I thought that was genius. So I forgot to bring that in there, but I just wanted to bring that into the conversation.
No, that's a good point too. Yeah, I remember when I was watching the movie, that stood out to me too. Just that, like, I mean, it makes sense. Like we see, just like you said, Shuri buries her grief in her technology, whereas like these other characters have been shown to be very spiritual all the time. T'Challa, and so I think that is a very cool aspect of it. Like these movies, like people need to give Marvel more credit. Like these movies have a lot of depth and nuance to them.
Some of them, because
okay, so yes,
Thor: Love and Thunder.
Yeah, okay. When they give it their best,
when they hit,
they have a lot of nuance to them, and it is very beautiful. I do think. I don't know if we're gonna get a Black Panther 3. I hope we do. But I think so far this, duology has been some of Marvel's best work, just on so many different levels, visually, emotionally. So I agree, and like just like you said, I agree with everything you said. I really love that tradition versus technology.
And it kind of leads me to just one more thing to touch on with Shuri, because this was her film, so I feel like there's a lot to talk about with her. Like, I was not expecting that dark path, like that little bit of those moments, dude. That when the way
symbiote Shuri,
the way that she talked to M'Baku, like that little moment at both theaters that I was at, they were like, oh, people were like, oh, when she's like, are we clear? And it's like, oh, okay, girl, so that I was not expecting, and I thought it was very interesting. It was a very interesting choice. And remember, as I was watching the movie the first time, I'm like, where is this going? Yeah. Like, is she the Black Panther? Is she not? She is, but like, oh, now she's turning into a more villainous side, right? More Killmonger is she, like
Namor.
And,
they're very similar, honestly.
Yeah, and so I wasn't expecting it, and to be honest, for a moment I thought she's like, okay, she's from now on gonna become a villain, and like someone's gonna have to put a stop to her. Like I'm like, is this where Namor becomes the good guy? Like,
yeah.
I didn't know what was gonna happen.
Yeah.
So I was surprised by that turn. Obviously, like you said, she's a great actress, so like I thought she did very well. But then, so that's like, I guess what I'm trying to get at is like in the moment as I was watching that happen, I was so like, what's going on here? This is interesting. And then she gets stabbed, and you're like, oh my god, they're killing her off. Like it created, and this goes back to the movie being almost 3 hours long and super entertaining, because like the whole time you're just like, oh my god, this the pace of it is so great, the script is great, and then now that I have time to breathe and like take a step back, it all makes sense. Like her grief, she dealt with it one way, then she dealt with it, and then she loses someone again. So then she deals with it a completely different way, and then by the end of it, she's like rounding her character out by like burning the garb, right? And like, what a way to end it. So, I mean, I'm not sure if you have comments on that, but like, I personally just found that very interesting. Like, I already thought it was interesting. Like, this movie kept surprising me. You know? It kept surprising me. And the fact that they did Talocan so great that they. My one thing though with Talocan is that, but it ended up resolving itself. Like as I was watching it, when Shuri goes in and to see Talocan, and they have that montage, I was like, with the music they were playing, I was like, this feels very like. Did you watch Aquaman, right?
I fell asleep.
Okay, all right. It felt very Aquaman-ish, where like there's a montage of Aquaman with the girl where like they literally play like a pop song in the background. We don't say her
full name here.
What's that?
I said we don't say her full name.
Oh, I forgot her name.
Mara.
Mara.
Amber Heard.
Amber Heard. Yeah. That there's a montage in Aquaman with Amber Heard where like a pop song is playing and it's like their romance like building.
Oh, is that the? I know what you're talking about,
dude. And there's literally like, I'm just like, it feels so forced, it feels so out there. So when that montage of her like going through Talocan started, and like there's people swimming up to her and going like, and then there's like she's walking by and there's a merchant going like, I sell you this, I buy this, you know, like I was like, this is very in my face. And also, once again, this is like as I'm watching the movie, what my thought process was. Like,
I like this.
wait, hold on. No, it redeems itself. But like, okay, so then there's like the whole hand gesture that they do. I'm like,
Kamehameha.
Yeah, okay. I was like, people are gonna say Kamehameha, but also I'm like, okay, so that's their version of like Wakanda Forever, right? And then they have a version of Wakanda Forever. It's Rise Talocan.
Talocan.
Yeah. So it's like, to me, I was just like, this. It's like, it's very in my face. It's very like this. The music is kind of not helping. Like, that's how I was feeling about it. And I was like, okay, this literally just mirrors everything that like Wakanda is. I'm like, okay, so you're making Talocan the next Wakanda, I guess. Like, okay. Yeah. But then, and so I felt kind of weird about it. Yeah. But then at the end, when she's like, you know, about to kill him or something, right? Then she thinks about that, right? Yeah. And she says, like, wait, like, he's fighting for his people. Yeah. Which is exactly what we have been doing. Yeah. Because guess what? Talocan is mirroring Wakanda as they're both very interesting civilizations that have kind of thrived the same way by being in hiding and by, you know, maintaining their culture, but also advancing in their own ways. Yeah. So, yeah, it was one of those things where it was like, I thought it was kind of weird at first. I'm like, why are you... This is so obvious. Like, it's kind of like right in my face about it. And then by the end of it, I was like, oh, it was supposed to be. Yeah. So that was just like a small little nitpick. But like it resolved itself by the end. And any little nitpick that I have resolved itself in the end. Like,
that's funny.
You know, like, why are these characters doing this? But then it made sense. Yeah. You know, so yeah, I thought that was really cool. So... At the end of the day, man, like, I just feel like this movie was well done. It was firing on all cylinders. I don't feel like there were many missed opportunities or anything like that. I'm trying to think. I feel like there's a few more things that need to be mentioned about it.
I mean, we could talk about this movie, like, all day if we had the time.
Yeah. So what are your final thoughts, man, on Black Panther? Wakanda Forever.
Final thoughts. My final thoughts are... They kind of like the first thing I said, they really pulled it off. Like, this movie could have been, you know, the letdown that like Love and Thunder was. Like, personally, there's issues that I have with Multiverse of Madness, but I still enjoyed it.
I had so many issues with that movie.
I know you did.
A lot of issues. Because I was so hyped for it. Sorry.
Love and Thunder, I definitely had more issues with. And,
agreed.
This movie, it's just funny because on paper, it had so much working against it, but they really pulled it off. It goes to show you just, a lot of people say these movies are just made for money. Well, yeah, they're not making them from charity, all right?
Yeah, that's true.
But, it also goes to show you when you have people working on the films that, are genuinely putting their hearts into it, they can make something special. Yeah. Ryan Coogler has now given us 2 super, some of the best MCU movies.
Yeah.
With, the most heart, the most, character, culture, and, the fact that he was able to just balance everything that he had to.
They're so well-rounded. His movies have everything, and they all do it well.
Yeah. So that's my final thoughts. It's just, my hat's off to everybody involved. It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah. I remember one of the things I wanted to mention real quick.
Yeah.
Obviously, we've talked about Namor and Talocan. Number 1, I thought, obviously, Tenoch Huerta did amazing as acting. They made him look so cool. The angles they filmed him at, his garb, everything he did, it was awesome.
Yeah, I love the septum piercing, the super big earrings.
It was great. Yeah. The costume design and everything was awesome.
Yeah.
Dude, his wings, I know a lot of people were very, skeptical about it. A lot of people, it's one of the things that he gets made fun of as a character, right? Just like Aquaman talking to fish or whatever. His wings were things that people were like, how are they going to make that look? It's going to look dumb. It's going to look silly. Dude, they made it look so cool. Yeah. His movement, I was honestly astonished.
The sound they make, too.
Yes. Yeah. I was astonished at, how well they utilized his wings and how they turned it from being a detractor of something that they might want to hide. Because remember, there was questions of, are they even going to give him the wings? Yeah. Could he just not have them, right? Yeah. It's not practical. It looks weird. How are you going to make it work? So he might not even have them. Yeah. They were his biggest strength, I would say, because they couldn't shoot him. They couldn't shoot him. They were like, and he was like, dude, and at first, the first time you see him, sure, you might be like, it's a little silly, but they make it work. They made it look awesome, and I think that's going to be something that's going to be one of his biggest strengths, moving forward, because who do we know that can fly and fly like that, with that agility? Sure, Iron Man or War Machine can fly, but with that agility, nope. Scarlet Witch can propel herself up, but with that agility, nope. Yeah. So
and he's a mutant. Flat out say he's.
Which, by the way, in the comics, he's one of the first mutants, right?
Yeah, I think he's in terms of mutants that were ever introduced by Marvel, he's the first.
Yeah, I have a book. It's right behind you, the Marvel.
Oh, the encyclopedia. Yeah.
The other one, it's the creation of Marvel, as a brand.
Yeah.
And dude, that one, I think Human Torch was the first character, but it wasn't the Johnny Storm.
Yeah, it was the original.
Yeah, it was the original Human Torch, and then it was Namor.
Yeah, I don't think it was even considered Marvel yet when those characters.
Yes, it wasn't Marvel yet. Yeah. But so Namor technically is the first mutant that got published.
Yeah.
But obviously we know Apocalypse is technically the first mutant in the Marvel world.
History, yeah.
Yeah. So but I thought that was really cool, man. So I just wanted to put that out there. But yeah, final thoughts on the movie. I agree with you as well. I think that this movie was just so well-rounded, and it really is, I'll say it again, a return to form for Marvel, because that's what I need. I need a well-rounded film that has a good storyline, good characters, good character development, and, I could take or leave the funny, right? And that's one of the things with Love and Thunder, right? And we could talk about that all day, but I really enjoyed.
Had really balanced humor.
And you know how, which is interesting too. You know how I know that this is a really good film and why I really like it is that they didn't do what I thought they should have done regarding Black Panther and Shuri and all that. Mm-hmm. Even with all that said, I thought it was a great film. I had great time. I had fun. So the fact that someone can go into a movie and man, they didn't do what I wanted with the characters. The storyline wasn't what I wanted. But God damn it, it was a great film. There was great messages. It was done very well. Like you said, hats off to the team.
Yeah.
So, and I'm excited again, man. Like I'm excited for this for these characters. Like I'm gonna go see it tonight. You might go see it tonight. I'm gonna go see it tomorrow. Like it's one of those I think it's gonna
special.
It's a special film. Hopefully it'll break some box office records. We'll see. Probably not, but like it's gonna be great, and so it's gonna be successful. So I'm happy for that because man, we needed it. I like when it comes to films. Like I've been loving the Disney Plus show stuff. Like some of them, not all of them, but like I think it's a big win. And I'm glad that Black Panther was the one to do it. So
absolutely,
yeah. All right, man. So yeah, guys, that about wraps it up for us.
Wakanda forever.
Wakanda forever.
Licky Talocan.
Yeah, Talocan, guys. We're gonna see Namor again. We're excited. Thank you guys for watching, and we'll see you guys in the next one. Hey everyone, thanks for watching. Please like and subscribe, and stay tuned for what's next to come on The Real Breakdown.